Mike, if you could, I'm sorry, Mark,
go ahead.
Mike, if you could just get us started and begin recording.
Yep, on it. You're all set.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. So let's begin quickly here with minutes. We have March and April minutes to review.
Motion to approve the March and April minutes.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
Roll call vote.
Oh, a roll call vote, sorry. Terry,
Fair.
Yes.
Paul,
Yes,
and I'm a yes, so those are passed.
probably for the edificacy of the minutes, that should be recognized that I'm participating remotely due to my inability to attend.
Okay, very good. We have that noted. Next item of business, legislative update. Let's do that first.
Great. Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good to be with you all today. I'll just say briefly that this is the final week of real activity in the legislature. We've got the House and Senate meeting in session on Thursday to take up all the various committee of conference reports that the two bodies have been working on over the last few weeks. So we'll have a pretty good sense at the end of the day on Thursday where we are and the remainder of the bills from the session. And then at that point, bills will be enrolled and go to the governor for his consideration. And then any bills that he chooses to veto, typically the legislature comes back into session in September. It has been or later in the summer to take up governor's vetoes. Then over the summer, bills that have been interim studied will be taken up for discussion. And so I believe, and Kathy can provide some additional detail on some of the bills that are up in that, but I think they'll be doing June meetings. In July and August. We don't anticipate any legislative activity, but in June, we do anticipate interim study bills to have work sessions. So with that, I'll ask Kath to dial in.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Good to see everybody. First, any questions on the spreadsheet of the updated bills? I think it was pretty clear. I mean, the bills that we were concerned about have either been interim study or just IT being to legislate, and that's there. But true, going forward, matter of fact, today, one of the House committees met for work sessions on bills they had voted interim study. However, House Education has scheduled a subcommittee work session on bill we're not interested in following. I mean, we're going to follow establishing a committee to study school meal programs. It's interesting as they, again, let me just back up. The only recommendations that can come out of these work sessions is to recommend future legislation or not. Now, that does not mean we don't see the bill again. You know, they can refile, the sponsor could refile. But that's a subcommittee work session. Bill of interest, House Bill 1680, Representative Luna's bill, that will have a full committee work session. That has not been scheduled. But what I've learned the past few months in House Education, like exec sessions, they'll only like name one bill and then they vote on a batch of bills. It was interesting how they did it. It was very different from every other committee. They'll list all the bills they're going to act on. So, you know, our antenna is still up a little bit in that sense. So we'll be monitoring the subcommittee work session on this particular bill of school meal programs and see what else may be discussed. But with protocol and with scheduling, they should schedule when that full committee work session will be on House Bill 1680. And they'll do that in June. There'll be no legislative activity in July and August per the speaker. The Senate, we don't typically worry about. They don't do these work sessions or things like that. And then they can usually will come back after Labor Day and to continue. They have to get their reports out on bills of interim study. October 28th, Friday. So that's the last day to file any interim study reports. So they come back in September, it'll probably be a quick couple of meetings in that sense. But I think going forward, I suspect, and we'll see when, and I know you'll talk more about the elections, but when the filing period opens up, I'm sure we'll see some of the Representative Luna refiling. I'm sure he'll look at, running again. I'm sure he'll probably be filing some of the bills that he get through this year. So I think he'll keep us on our toes a little bit.
Yeah, so we will be, just to kind of further talk about deadlines and timetables. So we'll begin to start seeing bills stop in 2023 in September. Incumbent legislators can file bill requests, LSRs at that time. Of course, there's a possibility that that incumbent that files loses their election, in which case the LSR goes away. But then the bill filing in earnest will begin later in the year after the elections in November, going into then December. I do think it's worth talking about the elections generally. On the House side, we don't know yet. You know, we have an idea of who cares about these issues on one side or the other. We don't have a real good sense of who's coming back and who's not. The filing period, there's a prescribed filing period from June 1st to June 10th. So, and that'll roll into the survey we'll talk about here in a short while. But by June 10th, we're going to have a full list of who's running and who's not. And so at that point, we'll be able to set aside a group of folks who've already said they're not going to come back next year. And on the Senate side, we already know of literally a third of the Senate. 8 of the 24 senators thus far have said they are not running for re-election. So that is Aaron Hennessy, District 1 in the North Country. Republican Bob Guida, District 2. He's not running. No, he is retiring. And he's endorsed Tim Lang, state representative, to replace him. There may be a primary there. We'll see. Harold French, state senator, Republican state senator. John Reagan is also retiring. And then, of course, the Senate President Chuck Norris is running for U.S. Senate, so he won't be returning as Senate President. So there'll be a leadership change in the Senate as well. Then on the Democratic side, you've got Tom Sherman, Seekos is running for governor. Jay Kahn and Keene, who said he's not running. And who's the third who has said, I'm recollecting here?
Oh, well, Kevin
Kavanaugh.
but kind of not by choice.
Right. So Kevin Kavanaugh, who's a senator from Manchester, is getting basically redistricted out of his district. So he has actually announced to run for executive council. It's Ted Gatzis in District 4. So thus far, that's 8. We still have a week or so before filing even begins. On the House side, there typically is a turnover of 25 to 33%. So some folks that we know on this issue will undoubtedly not return. But we'll provide a report on that at the next meeting to give you a sense of who's coming back, who's not. So we know the cast of characters broadly waiting on a primary and general election. So.
It's been interesting. Today, one of the House committees met, a couple of was the Health Science and Technology, and someone tremendous that they weren't coming back. But I've not heard that with Health Education. I think some of those committee members, or not all, are very passionate about what they do. I'd be surprised if someone decided not to seek the election.
Having said that, I think these have been a tough 2 years for a lot of these legislators. And so I think it may see, I think that's in the Senate, you're seeing that. I think you'll see more people not come back than you might normally. So.
I don't know if you folks can hear me, but my audio is a little bit garbled. I don't know if Paul is hearing things clearly or not.
Yeah, it's been intermittent a bit too. I've been able to catch most of it though.
The bottom line, what I'm hearing is nothing, there are no surprises, and we're tracking some bills, but nothing that we have to worry about in the immediate future.
I think that's right. Correct. I think the one issue that we may want to discuss is when 1680 gets scheduled for its work session, how we like to interact in that process. Obviously, we can be in the room, we can, provide information, support, testimony, what have you. But it'll be interesting to get a read on what direction they're going in, and then how we choose to take part in that process from an information standpoint to message one way or the other. Again, that's not been scheduled yet. We expect it'll be sometime in June, likely then sometime in September. Maybe some additional work on it, but
I'm just gonna look it up just in case.
other than that, I think we're getting to the end of at least the active part of the session here, and then it'll be a lot of, seeing what the body is coming back, what they look like, and what our relationships with them are, and what their interests are.
Nothing at this moment, House Bill 1680 for work session, but that could come up, pop up in.
Yeah. Continue to watch for that.
Any additional thoughts on 1680?
We're still, it's a little garbled. I didn't hear the reference number to the bill.
1680.
And then that's the very complicated one that kind of wove in the commission's recommendation into one big bill. Is that right?
That is the budget funding issue.
And was there also 608? Was that another one?
Jay?
I'm not
Not
sure.
hearing.
Yeah, we're not hearing anything now, guys.
Can you hear us now?
Yeah, I can hear Jim the best. I don't know if it's Mike's. Mark, you're second. Kathy's going in and out a lot.
We have not had the problem before.
Yeah, it's interesting. They've got mics all over the ceiling in here, so.
Jane, can you hear me better now?
Yeah, it seems to be better. Paul, what about you?
Yeah, it's a little bit better.
Let me look up 1608. That's not on my tracking chart, but I'll just see.
I think it's 6.
I'm sorry,
608.
608. Yeah.
Oh, House Bill 608 or Senate Bill 6?
I might not.
Oh, right. That got laid on the table.
Okay.
So that's definitely, that was, let me see when that happened, hon.
Yeah, so there was no study committee on that one. That was
no, no.
just my question.
Yeah,
Got
that
it.
got,
Thank you.
that got tabled early on, well, yeah, that got tabled back in January, so that's,
Okay.
yeah. Now,
Thanks.
could we see that again? Possibly. Possibly.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say that some of the concepts that we've seen over the last 2 years will undoubtedly be just reintroduced in 2023. There's no prohibition on them doing that.
Right.
You know, sometimes in the second year of the session, there are prohibitions on introducing bills of similar content that have been killed. That all goes away with the new legislature. So I fully expect we'll see some of this very topic matter come back in January.
Okay. All right, so it sounds like 1680 is really the only thing we're going to be tracking through interim study
Correct.
through the summer. Okay, very good. Any other questions, Paul?
No, that you summarized it.
Okay, very good. Let's move on to the questionnaire.
Great, thank you, Mark, and I guess what I'll do first, I'll just kind of give you an overview of my thoughts in putting this together, and Paul, I appreciate your comments and edits that you'd shared. Those are certainly helpful, and I think from a process standpoint, what I look for is, if there are comments today, I can mark up my sheet. People can also follow up with me. We have time. I've spoken to the vendor. They turn these around pretty quickly once I give them a final work product. So what the final product will look like is a lot cleaner and more formatted than what this is. But my thinking is with doing surveys like this, and I've done these before, not to make them too long, because you've got them for a finite attention span. To try and capture the issues I think we care about from a kind of a general sense of where people are coming from on this issue, how much they care about it, how much they're motivated by it, to get into the weeds a little bit on some of the swept questions, also to talk about what they're hearing. I think it's helpful for us to understand from a constituent standpoint, are these candidates, are they hearing about this all the time from either constituents or from advocacy groups, or is it something that they're just generally aware of? And so the goal here is to try and capture some of that information. I do, and try and do it in different ways, whether it's the kind of multiple choice, so to speak, open-ended questions, where we leave kind of the opportunity for them to add additional comment. But the goal would be to, as we talked about, mail this out to the universe of all candidates once we know the slate, which will be in several hundred. Included the package that includes a return envelope, so they can fill it out and return it to us. I would envision chasing this maybe with a smaller reminder piece. this is something that if we want to, we could also, consider uploading to the website and inviting candidates to go there and provide their comments online. But the goal, I would hope, is by the end of the summer, we've captured, not all, some people are gonna just throw it out right away. Some people are gonna do it right away. And some will do it after we do a little bit of prodding, but at least to get a critical mass of information from enough of these candidates and who will ultimately become electeds, so that help inform us going into next year about who's motivated, who's not, who wants to learn more, who may want to sit and talk with us about this, who may be open to a conversation. So in any event, no pride in authorship. You know better than anybody what data points you'd like to get. And so, with that, I'm happy to, like I said, Paul, I'll incorporate your comments. We don't have to do it now. You can mark it up and send it back to me, however you'd like to do it, whatever's easiest. But ultimately, when I've got your comments, I will reformat, update it with the edits, send a final version around for everyone to approve, for the board to approve. And then at that point, I'll turn it over to the vendor. We'll get it in production and we'll be ready, to drop that Monday. I would think that Monday will be the plan after that Friday.
All right. Paul has written his stuff down. We can go through those questions first. And then if anyone else has any questions, we can take them as we need to.
Sure.
All right, so just start right on the first page. There's a question about total population of the member communities. To give context, is that something that we think we might want to do?
I don't think it'd be hard to do if we wanted to. I think we could approximate that with a number.
That's why I went with a population number rather than, registered voters. That's going to be a little harder to ferret out rather than just going to the census data. But I thought, it's all well and good to have a list of communities, but until you start talking about, okay, this represents X number of people. Oh, that may be something I would want to pay particular attention to.
Okay. Everyone okay with it?
I
Do you think it matters?
don't think it matters much, because I don't think it's gonna help you because the number is gonna be pretty small there. You don't have any large cities.
Yeah.
Most of the summit, 20-something thousand people. I mean, it's just Manchester's 100,000, Nashville's, close to that. I don't, these are mostly small towns. I don't think it really pushes the needle for us either way, but
Do you think it hurts because it is a small number?
I think the smaller number is, if you've got a population of 1.3 million people and you're representing maybe 100,000. I don't think it really does a whole lot for you at the end of the day.
I'm not wedded either way. It was just a thought of another way of describing, our membership.
Yeah.
What I can do, if it's okay, is I can tally it. I can give you a rough number.
Okay.
And then I can share what that is.
Sure.
And then when you see the number, I think you can decide whether it helps or
Okay.
hurts.
All
So
right.
why don't I do
Very
that?
good. Yep. Next comment is about guaranteeing. My thought on this, Paul, is that our organization will not share the information. I think that it is good to let them know that we intend to, this is for internal use. I know there are no 100% guarantees, but I think as an organization, it should be stated that it's our position, we're not going to share it.
And I know we talked about this in one of the last meetings, and so I know where you're going with this, Paul, and I appreciate what you're saying. And I guess I do think we'll get more responses if we make it clear we're not going to publicize on the website, right? We're not going to score it. We're not going to put it out like in a newspaper ad or something. It's for internal purposes. I don't know if we can wordsmith that in a way to make that point while acknowledging that if there is sharing within the organization, someone decides to, we can't control that, of course.
I was thinking more of, if one of the newspapers or whatever decides or hears about the survey, then requests to get a copy of it, and then we get embroiled in a 91A request. I really don't want to waste litigation money defending that position. So emphatically stating we will not, I thought perhaps overstated. It is still our intent and purpose not to share it, but we may be forced to.
Yeah, you will be, because you take, some public money goes into this organization.
Sure, no, that's a fair point.
And then they'll just turn around and go 91A, hand it out. You might be able to delay it a while, but sooner or later.
Yeah, it's not the organization's intent to share the data.
Well,
Or should we even say that?
I would
what
not
we're
say-
saying-
Just,
Yeah.
it's a survey and it's subject to right to know, and if they're willing to participate in it, they're gonna know that their opinions are gonna be, ultimately shared. So I don't think that even if we say we're not gonna share it, we can't guarantee that it won't be shared. So I think they should know right away that this is subject to review. And why wouldn't we want to put it on the website?
I think they're running for office after all. Sooner or later, someone's gonna ask them all these questions. So
Okay.
they can't hide behind it forever. So if they don't want to answer it, then that might say something about them. Who's running, him or her.
So then, with that commentary, do we want to strike that line and just leave it? I mean, I think we can. Or we could make a different decision, as Jane says, we could do a digest without doing individual names. We could digest and say 34% said this, 22% said that. Those are options as well.
I know at the last meeting, we discussed how there was more downside to sharing individual responses than upside, and that it was more a tool for our internal purposes, both in terms of knowing who's with us, who's against us, but also who needed more education. So that's why we kind of took this tack, but just the emphatic nature, this statement made me pause a little bit. That's why I just questioned it.
Yeah, I don't think you can say it because I don't think you can guarantee that it's going to be used only within CC2.
Why don't we just strike the highlighted sentence and strike the word only in the following sentence? And then go from there.
I personally like the sentence is importantly, please know that we will not publicize it, so we're not gonna take it used for political fodder. That's the message we need to get across. I think the second sentence is problematic, but I like the previous sentence intact as it is, because we are not, it's not our intent to, I don't think we should publish it on the website. I think we should use it for tactical information for our operations. And if someone files a right to request, or if somebody leaks it out who has access to our organization, then that's why the second sentence is problematic, but I keep the first one.
How about it, it is not our intent to publicize your answers, but your answers may be subject to right to know requests.
Process question. If Jim's staff is the only one who sees the responses and never discloses it to us, but just aggregates them and reports them, does that create a right to know barrier or a wall that would shield us from that?
I don't know. I don't think so. The request can come to Jim representing the group, I think.
Well, the attorney-client privilege is the question, I think is what Paul's getting at. But
Yeah, but,
obviously, if that's the
then-
case,
Product.
yeah, but it's not work product from an attorney. It's a lobbyist analyzing data. There's a distinction. It's not
it's collecting
a
the
legal
data.
opinion on such and such, or we're gonna go purchase this real estate, but we don't want somebody to know.
I guess in the end, it put us in the position of having to try and protect information that candidates for elective office have given us.
Yeah.
Right? And they're the ones that are standing for public office, and you would think that,
Better for us to not fight that battle, I don't think. We could be criticized for that.
I mean, I think we can decide whether or not we choose to do something on the website or not, but maybe it is that they're assuming the risk that sharing that information with us could make it subject to public disclosure.
What if we kind of hybrid this with leaving that sentence in? Importantly, please know that we do not intend to publicize your answers. Your responses will be used within CC 2.0 to help better inform us. And leave it at that, because I don't think we have to say anything about 91A. We're a public body, they're running for public office. If we get a 91A request, we deal with it. Somebody leaks it. It's public information, but we don't intend to. I understand what Sean's saying about be upfront with them that this is for our internal use. That's why we're doing it.
Right.
We're not scoring it. We're not using it.
Right.
In any,
There's not gonna be an
offensive
ad on
way.
Channel 9
That's
tomorrow. that So,
Yeah.
you know,
Yeah.
selected this answer on this.
right.
I'd still be more comfortable with the last line added. However, your answers may be subject to public disclosure under 91A. I think it's fair because you don't know how sophisticated the people are running for office, and respectfully. Some of them are very familiar, some of them are not.
We may end up with a little bit of attrition because of that, but then we also take this issue off of our plate of having to
To deal with it.
deal with
if
it.
Something happens.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, I'm good with that last sentence. You okay with that last sentence about 91A? That Jane just said,
Yes.
adding that last sentence. You okay? Karen?
Sure.
Paul, you okay with that?
You kind of broke up, so I wasn't quite sure. What you-
Are you okay with Jane's suggestion for that additional sentence about your responses may be subject to 91A?
I don't oppose to it, no.
Okay.
Um,
All right, let's see.
Does Jim and Kathy have a sufficient input now to understand how to wordsmith this?
I think I do. I think I have a sense of where you want to go with this. So I will take a crack at that. I'll make that. Okay.
That he's not coming back to us on this, he's just gonna launch.
Well, he and I can talk. If there's some big question, we'll come back.
Yeah, my goal is to do a final,
Mhm.
not like a series of workups
Right,
here,
right.
but take this and
Second page, question about drop down.
Yeah, I wasn't sure what format this was taking. Now it sounds from Jim's further clarification that it's going to be in a paper form. In which case then bullets don't do it. You need letters to it so they can ascribe a letter or circle something or instruct them how to respond.
Right, and that's part of the formatting process. So when the vendor does this, Paul, they'll provide that, checkbox or whatever that is, they can elect an answer.
Great.
Yep.
Okay, on question 7, you added BPT, VET, and lottery.
Yeah, we didn't want to necessarily exclude the possibilities that candidates may have opinions about those sources of revenue too, since they are major sources along with the others that are currently stated.
That's easy to add. That's not a problem.
Very good. Any other comments?
You had an addition, I think, on question 8 as well, Paul, right?
Number 9.
That's correct.
Yep, sorry.
It seemed to be, with only 2 real responses or 3, which I'm not sure anyone has ever suggested doing away with SWEP, but we could all hope, I guess. It would be, I just thought it would be interesting to see if there is another alternative that hasn't been discussed, and that's the one I kind of threw out there. It could be anything else. It could also, the other intent of the question, for those that don't have it in front of them, was to, the SWEP should be reduced to only the amount to meet that community's adequate education obligation. That completely takes care of donors and receiver towns. To speak, I know there's a constitutional question, and that's the second half of the thing, is to understand if the candidate understands there is a constitutional question with that type of solution. So it just, the 3 options left me kind of, okay, what does that mean in a response? That doesn't really tell me much.
Well, someone will have to understand, because that's very similar to the second response. In staying within the community, people would have to understand that the second bullet is an amount of money based on a consistent tax rate across the state, right? And may raise more money than they need.
Yep.
And be used however.
And that was the other element of it, is to try to understand what granularity a candidate might understand, the difference between the second one and the one I proposed.
This is one where I might also add in another, I don't know enough to answer option.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, because I think then that's going to tell us, where we got into this level of granularity. If they say, look, I don't know, that's an open door, I think, for us to maybe have a conversation. And so,
I think I'd rather do it that way than have 2 that are so similar. And I think that tells us enough as far as whether we have to educate the candidate
Yeah.
or not.
In the second one down there where it says to support educational and municipal obligation, even though that it's done, I'm not so sure that the word, I think I would just put a period right after
Should
educational.
remain with that community, period.
period.
Yeah, or just say to support education, because it's a statewide education property tax.
Yep.
It's being used, I don't care what they say, they ship it to you and you pay the school locally. And the remainder stays over, but to suggest that you're gonna take that money and use it for another purpose, maybe it can be done, but I don't wanna advertise it.
Okay, so should I strike the and municipal reference in that? Okay.
Yeah, I think I get it.
And
That's
so
a good point,
then,
Terry.
okay, so then, so on this one, so strike that.
Yeah.
Leave the 3 as they are, and then add in, I don't know enough to answer.
That's
Yeah.
Okay,
I think that gets us.
That's a
where we
good
want.
edit.
okay.
All right, number 9, you added a 3rd bullet.
Again,
you
giving the
added-
opportunity to say, I need more information.
Right. And also added the word property taxpayer rather than just taxpayer.
Which is our focus.
Yep,
You can put that in both of them.
yeah, he's gonna,
Property.
we're gonna do
Okay.
property, and then add, I don't know.
So ask for more information.
Yep.
Add property. And you'll notice 8 and 9 are in some sense asking the same thing in 2 different ways. But I feel like it kind of helps get to number 9 is like a kind of a more transparent political statement in a sense of like philosophy. So I think it'll be helpful information to have.
You think you should have the word ask in there? Or if they ask me, I would say no. See what happens, but maybe it should be required by the state,
That's fine. Yeah, that's a good point.
you know, I would.
The state doesn't ask.
Well, yeah, and then under the yes, you didn't put it in, so yes, I would put the required in, but I put it in the yes answer as well. You didn't,
I support the
I
state
support-
requiring.
the state requiring property, yes, just
Okay.
to make it consistent.
Yep, that's a good point. Yep, that's a good point.
Good.
I don't say if you ask anybody about any kind of tax, they're gonna charge.
They're gonna say
Yeah,
no.
They're gonna say no, just to start
I
off.
was feeling magnanimous when I wrote ask.
All
Sorry.
right. Any other thoughts on this?
I had a question on number 2. I think that's a really good question, but I'm wondering if it should be phrased, is this, your highest legislative priority? Not so much about how you feel about it, but sort of that sense of who you're representing. It's extremely important to me, or, okay, it can be important, but do you identify it as a legislative priority, as a part of your service to your constituencies? It's just a finer point, but I just throw that out there.
Yeah, no, that's a good point, Jane. I can,
That's also
I can
going
work that
to
in.
tell us a lot as far as, especially those candidates to represent our communities as a coalition,
right,
if they understand what the impact is on their constituents. Because that may be a big piece of education that we can do for them.
well, this question to me is similar to a question when you're doing a horse race survey. Do you support so-and-so, or do you, it's the intensity question.
Right.
I strongly support, I somewhat support.
Right.
Right, when you see that real high, strong, number.
Yeah.
This is an intensity question, so, okay, that's a good point. I'll tweak that in that way.
When you say you place on educational funding, should you be more specific and say the word state education funding? Or something like that? I mean, yeah, if you want to spend more money locally, who cares, but we're really talking about the state education where the money comes out of the state. Perhaps.
That is a good point and a good distinction, because, yeah, what we found through the commission, we've learned ourselves, is a lot of people don't understand how education is funded.
So I'll make it clear we're talking about state education funding there then. I'll add that in.
I had another question. After number 3, would it make sense to say on a scale of 1 to 10, how do you rate the state's funding of education? They're doing a good job, bad job, terrible job. We kind of drill down on that a little bit later on in sort of the sources and whether funding needs to be increased. But I like that 1 to 10 kind of metric because it's easy to look at, it's easy to identify. Do you think the state is adequately funding education for all its communities?
Yeah, you know what I might do, Jane, if I did that, then I probably would pair it with question 6. And I'd have them so they're back to back with one another. Because they kind of.
Yeah.
They flow together. Yep.
Do you even need number 6 if you get the 1 through 10 ranking on education funding?
Well,
What does it tell you different?
I think it tells me the 1 to 10 ranking is just your general satisfaction with the system. I think it's worth knowing them, but what is that? If you're really dissatisfied, that still could be a difference between increasing dramatically, like that really intense, like we've got to plow a lot of additional resource in the system versus not. So,
Or whether it's a systemic or the way we do it or whatever.
right. And I think, sometimes having, again, different questions that get to the same issue a little bit differently it helps us also understand whether the person answering, how well they understand the issue. Because if it doesn't flow logically, then it, you know what I mean? There, it gives us a little bit of information. And again, as we think about potential folks who may require some additional information, that helps us. And it's not going to cost us, there's no additional cost adding another question to the survey. This is not a long survey the way it is. So we could do that, I think, without too much effort.
Okay,
Yeah, repetitive questions are always good in a survey because it creates a validity index throughout. If a person inconsistently answers the same similar questions, then you know we got a problem either in their ability to respond, their position, or the need for more education on it. So I think it's very telling to have validation questions that are very similar.
What Paul is saying is we want to maybe hopefully weed out people that answer C on every multiple choice question.
So
yeah,
that brings up an interesting thing I always have about scale responses. 1 through 10 is quite a long scale. What's the difference between a 6 and a 7 or a 3 and a 4? I've always, in surveys that I've done, 5 scales are been more useful because there's not so many splitting of the hairs.
I don't have a strong feeling either way. So,
Just an observation.
yeah.
I think that makes sense, Paul. Smaller scale might be easier to answer.
Going back to the word state education funding, should that flow through this entire document?
So the answer is yes. I was just looking. So number 4, how often do you hear about state education funding? You could add it there.
You know, the very first one.
5.
At number 1, I would say, what's your general system of state education funding in New Hampshire?
Yeah, I'll make that consistent throughout. Any
I'd be a little
representation-
careful about that. The reason being is that, let's say you're in Claremont, you hear about education funding forever and a day, and it's all, you know, we don't have enough money, we don't have enough money, we don't have money. And it's just a blanket statement. And if you really just narrow them into state education funding, you know, maybe 1 out of 10 people identify specifically as the state not funding us. It's more of a, you know, an overall education funding problem. So I'd be careful to keep narrowing this down and solely on state, because you may get, no, I don't hear anything on state funding.
That's interesting. Number 4, right, because, you know, education funding is every time you have a school board making a presentation on a budget, right?
Right.
So it's a tough question. I mean, it's an important question, but what are we really trying to get at? Is education funding a priority of your constituents? Are you hearing positive? Are you hearing negative? You know what I mean? It's a little hard to parse this out.
Yeah, but the people that are going to be running to this office are going to be making decisions in communities that's going to affect, you know, in that case, have an impact on not the local funding, because it's going to turn around to the state funding, rather than give you more, take away, or give you nothing. I mean, this whole purpose we exist is.
Harry, you're going to speak up. I think you're breaking up. It seems like when people speak louder, they're less likely to break up.
Well, I'm just saying that the purpose of our being is to deal with state education issues.
and I kind of agree with Terry in the sense that we don't want to have people feel like they're responding about their local education funding. We want to know where they will stand and vote on the state participation in education funding. And so I think putting in state education funding and narrowing, making the focus more narrow in that discussion is important.
The other way to perhaps do that, and we can certainly make those edits throughout. I'm looking at the kind of the opening letter, the narrative. And so below, we've included a few survey questions we hope you'll consider answering to help us better understand your perspectives on education funding looking ahead to 2023. So, you know, I could amend that in such a way to make it clear, we're, you know, we're soliciting their input as a candidate for state office
Right.
to provide their perspectives and feedback on state education funding issues. Just to kind of help tee it up front, so it puts them in the frame of mind of this is what I'm answering here.
Because we've talked about in the past, not wanting people to take our positions and try to say that we're against education overall. We're not.
Right.
And so whatever a community wants to spend for education, that's fine with, from our perspective in Waterville Valley, they can spend whatever they want.
Right.
That's not the question. It's how is the state going to participate in the funding system? And how are these people going to vote potentially to do that? Is that taking from one community, you know, all that part of it.
Why don't I take-
It's more than that too. It's the whole formula structure too. I mean, that's, that it's tough because this is just one piece. It's how you fund it, and it's also how you calculate it. And that's what's very complex.
But it's the state's portion, not whatever the locals want to spend.
I can take a crack at amending that paragraph of the letter to make it clear what perspective we're coming from, what we're looking for from them. Okay.
Any other
I
thoughts?
just want to, you know, I agree with both what Mark and Terry are saying. My reservation, and I guess if we start focusing going on state, we have to recognize that that may filter some of the answers unduly. I'll use the example of the $100 million they cut out of the state education tax this past year. They all pat themselves on the back and say, there, see, we got property tax relief. No, they just, you know, we had to find $100 million from elsewhere. So whatever the state funding formula is, it's going to impact locally too. And so it's truly a total education funding scheme. I get where you're coming from, that's going to be where they have the most impact, but it's also misleading to say that that has no impact in local property taxes too. Half a survey is to communicate your position, not lead, but you know, at least open. Oh, yeah, that's true. We have a responsibility for an adequate education. Doesn't matter from what source, to many respects.
Any other thoughts on that? Do you have enough to work with?
I think I've got plenty to work with, so I will reformulate this over the next day or two. I'll work to have a final draft. I'll recirculate to the board by the end of the week. Look at it and just, you know,
If you don't say anything, you're good.
right. So what I'd love to have is hopefully by close of business on Friday, approval of a final draft, and I can work with the vendor then on it, kind of get it queued up and ready to roll. So we can drop it on, I guess that would be June 13th.
Yeah.
Okay,
Okay,
I got it.
very good. Any other business?
Did the billings go out?
Yes, I communicated the information to Portsmouth and they're working on the billings. I don't know if they're actually in the mail, but they have everything and Helen's working on them. Jane, have you heard? Because I was late on that, but I know Helen has it.
She has not reached out to me.
Okay, all right. Well, she sent me an email that said she has the information and they're working on the billing. So thank you for the reminder, Jean.
You're welcome.
The only other business was, I seem to recall at the last meeting, we started talking about renewing and updating the communications plan or of our work plan overall. Because the last one we have, I think ended this month. So if we're going to move forward, we need to have another look at that, see where we've met our goals and objectives and where we still they're either ongoing or we need to add to them.
Okay. I will,
Have that by the next meeting?
yep, I can work that up. Absolutely.
Very good. Anything else?
Motion to adjourn.
I have a motion to adjourn.
Second.
I got a second. We are adjourned. I'm not even gonna go through that. We're good.
Thank you.
All
All
right.
right.
Thank you all.
See you, Paul. See you,
Thank
Jane.
you.
See you, Jane.
Bye-bye.
All right. Great. Thank you very much.